Fixing Qibla direction by the Muslims. It is very easy for the Muslims. Everybody should keep in mind that Islam is the easiest way of life, and nothing is complex in this religion. Allah has not bound man to be dependent on any technological device like compass. The Muslims never used any kind of compass to fix the Qibla direction in the 7th century in the Prophet's times, and compass was not used in most of such cases before it was the 20th century. The Muslims pray towards the Qibla not fixing it by degrees, but by the general direction of the eyesight as east, west, north or south in contrast with the sun's position, and according to their own positions in connection with the Qibla. Mosques were built on the basis of their eyesight, not by the compass but by the sun's position. Nowhere in the entire range of hadith we find any mention of any use of compass. You please go through the Sahih al-Bukhari, book number 8, hadith number 392, and find how easy it is for us to fix our Qibla direction. Allah's apostle prayed facing Baitul Maqdis for 16 or 17 months, but he loved to face the Kaaba at Mecca. So Allah revealed, "Verily we have seen the turning of your face to the heaven." Quran, Surah number 2, verse number 144. So the Prophet faced the Kaaba in prayer. A man prayed with the Prophet facing the Kaaba and went out. He saw some of the Ansari people praying the Asr prayer with their faces towards Baitul Maqdis, and he said, "I bear witness that I prayed with Allah's apostle facing the Kaaba." So all the people turned their faces towards the Kaaba there and then. Yes, they changed the Qibla direction while they were in prayer, without any help of any device like compass. Thus, everything is easy in Islam. We fix our Qibla direction by our eyesight and intuition when we pray outside mosque. We need not fix it after calculating by the degrees of the compass. Even in the darkness, we fix our Qibla by our intuition when we need to pray. Fixation may be wrong, even it can be to the opposite direction, but our prayers are accepted if the other things remain alright. We need not have any compass for this purpose. A Muslim man or woman needs fixing the Qibla direction many times a day. For example, he or she needs to fix the direction of the Qibla to avoid facing it or turning back to it at the time of answering to the call of nature, and he or she does it within a moment. Look into the following hadith. Narrated Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, Allah's apostle said, "If any one of you goes to an open space for answering the call of nature, he should neither face nor turn his back towards the Qibla. He should either face the east or the west." East or west because they were in Medina. Qibla was to the south. Sahih al-Bukhari, book number 4, hadith number 146. This hadith proves that Qibla was in Mecca during the Prophet's time. It is clear by this hadith that only east, west, north and south are important to fix the Qibla direction. No minute details of degrees of the compass is essential for this purpose. Anyway, modern day use of compass is also acceptable because it is now available. It is pagan to debate on the Qibla direction of the early mosques. None of the 7th century mosques is in its original position. Those are either ruined or reconstructed. So it was not possible now to determine where to those mosques faced unless it is clear by the mihrab, like that of the ruins of Rahat Mosque of Israel, a 7th century mosque very recently discovered by the Archaeological Department of Israel. Rahat Mosque ruins in Israel. This ruined mosque clearly shows its Qibla-Direction towards Mecca. It is absurd to think that there were mosques that faced towards Petra instead of Mecca. Dan Gibson is wrong in this respect.
3 natural truths debunk the Petra-mosque fairy tales of Dan Gibson. Truth number 1. Dan Gibson amused us with much fun by telling that the early mosques faced towards Petra instead of Mecca. But at the same time he told that the early mosques are not in their original shape with original faces at present. Some of those are lost, some are renovated, and some are later adjusted with mihrabs. So, it is not possible for anybody to determine now, after 1,400 years, where those mosques faced to in the early years if not to Mecca. So, what Dan Gibson and his crazy fans say about those mosques is based only on their surmise. To tell the truth, it is now too hard to determine whether those Dan mosques were originally mosques or non-mosque buildings. Our careful examination shows that even some palaces, too, have been enlisted as mosques by Dan Gibson. Such biased samples and baseless surmise are not acceptable in the field of research. How did Dan Gibson determine their faces, and how could he be sure that those faced towards Petra is still a mystery like that of fairy tales? Truth number 2. Early mosques did not have any mihrabs. So, it is not possible for anybody to determine their faces by the scale of degrees. How could Dan Gibson determine it is still an unanswered question. We asked this question time and again, but neither Dan Gibson nor his blind supporters ever gave any reply. So, it can easily be concluded that the Petra-mosque theory is but a fairy tale, and this fairy tale has been pioneered only to undermine Islam. The greatest driving force behind this truth is that this fairy tale is told by only the Islam haters who freely preach that Islam is a false and fabricated religion. So, nobody should consider or care for this theory as a scientific truth. It is only a compilation of fairy tales. Truth number 3. Google can show and do many things except showing the traceless ones. The mosques which have lost their traces, on which have totally been renovated, or the walls of which do not show any accurate directions cannot be accepted for a direction test by saying that it is done with the help of Google. Google can show you something accurately when you fix and supply the data accurately. When data are inaccurate, Google shows the inaccurate things. And those inaccurate things cannot be sold among the public as scientific truths. Dan Gibson has been doing this for years. His input to the Google tool is not correct. How can he expect the correct output? In no way. Only drawing some red lines on the screen is not enough to be accurate. The starting point of every line must stand on accuracy, which Dan Gibson could never fix for any early mosque. No, nobody can fix it now, after lapse of 1,400 years' time and after so many occasions of changes. Nobody can fix the faces of early mosques accurately. So, the Petra-mosque tale of Dan Gibson must be rejected as inaccurate.
Everybody should keep in mind that mosques face the Qibla, not any lost pagan city like Petra. Let them understand this first, then come to talk on the city of Muslim Qibla. After all, Muslims are not pagan. Some people always walk on the wrong track. The people who try to say that Petra was the city of Qibla as because, according to them, some ancient mosques face Petra have ceased to understand that mosques face the Qibla, but the Qibla is not fixed by the faces of the mosque. It does not matter which are the mosques, that ever deviated towards Petra. The case is very simple for us. The faces of those mosques should be refixed towards the Qibla, with thanks to Dan Gibson for his use of the compass to expose the deviations. Deviations are not unique. We see the deviations of the so-called mosques are described by Dan Gibson are not of the same grade and same degree for all the buildings he examined. So it is very easy to say that those were actually nothing but deviations. Otherwise, their deviations from the Qibla in Mecca and their leaning towards Petra would have been universally of the same grade and of the same degree. One must have the power of understanding to differentiate between intentional fixation and unintentional deviation. If any deviation was there, it was certainly unintentional, as the Muslims never used the compass to fix the mosque's direction towards Qibla. It was customary of the Muslims to fix Qibla direction for a mosque on the basis of the position of the sun. As the Qibla at Mecca stands on or by the line of equator, the tropical deviation of the sun must be taken into consideration. It's a geographical truth that the seasonal deviation of the sun with the line of equator hovers between 0 degree to 23.5 degrees. So the directions fixed by the sun may be deviated from 0 degree to 23.5 degrees, and this deviation is negligible. Thus, it is universally acceptable that the buildings of which Dan Gibson is talking are actually facing towards the Qibla, not towards Petra. As because the deviation of none of these buildings crossed the negligible range of deviation, that is 23.5 degrees. I know that opposite arguments will jump in, but we must be sure that our forefathers were not accustomed to using the technological devices every now and then. Furthermore, the buildings in question were probably built before the availability of the compass. On the other hand, the people who raise the questions about the exactitude of the Qibla have compass in their hands which does not fit into the time, place, and the subject matter. Are those really mosques? We are in doubt. Probably ordinary non-mosque buildings have been in their list of mosques. Many of those so-called buildings are now ruined. How can it be decided whether they were really mosques? Dan Gibson's Petra theory is not a result of any fair research. He showed many red lines on the screen to show the direction of some mosques towards Petra. But all these he did by using not a general compass, but by using something specially designed for the purpose, which he calls as the Qibla tool. This Qibla tool is not a fair thing. Hoax or deception is there in it.
Qibla tool hoax of the sacred city. The tool has especially been designed and devised for showing Qibla in Petra. No other goals. Created by an anti-Islamic website, that is, the sacred city, and in the name of this website Dan Gibson launched his first attack on the Islamic shrine and city. Here is the logo of the website. The thumbnail of Dan Gibson's first video of the so-called research on the Qibla is also the same. So, it is quite clear that the aim of the Qibla tool created by this website is Dan's Petra thesis. It can rather be called the Petra tool. It is not an unbiased tool. As the gullible people are easy prey to any kind of hoax, they may find scientific truth in the red lines drawn by this tool towards the ruins of Petra, but we feel something wrong in it. Where is the truth in a tool if it needs to be designed and devised for a particular city? I know that Dan Gibson and his friends will deny our question by saying something unnatural. But still a new question will arise. Why the name of this tool is Qibla tool? Is this tool not capable of serving any general purpose? If yes, why then is it Qibla tool? If no, why then is it taken as a scientific tool at all? The Lost Faces of Early Mosques versus the Qibla tool. Dan Gibson himself claimed, 1. that the early mosques did not have mihrabs, niches. 2. That some of the mosques were ruined and lost, and 3. That some of them have been renovated later. We think he was right in all three assumptions. But a naive question naturally rises out of these three truths. How did then the Qibla tool determine the faces of the early mosques? How could then the Qibla tool determine the directions of their faces? Why does then Dan Gibson claim that those mosques faced towards Petra? The answers to these questions must necessarily be negative. No positive reply is possible. A tool cannot imagine, nor can it bring the past back. How can Dan Gibson's Qibla tool see the lost faces of the early mosques remains a vital, unanswered question. We cannot credit him as a researcher in the subject until this question is positively answered to. Only saying that it's a scientific research does not prove it as true or scientific. Millions of fans may swarm around him like locusts, but truth still stands as an indomitable question. Does he have the acceptable answer to overcome this challenge? Let us hear what Dan Gibson says in his YouTube video TWD number 6 Qibla tool.
Let's head over to the sacredcity.ca website and have a look and see how it works. Okay, this is the Sacred City website as it is at this time. The site changes. We can look at various things, but let's click on data at the top of the screen up here, and that takes us to the data page. And then if we look over here, we see the early Qibla tool. We'll look at that. Papers and maps are down here, different papers that I've written that are posted. Over here are the different films, including YouTube clips, and hopefully we'll keep this up to date. Plus the
Now, why should anybody need a separate tool for showing the Qibla direction of the early mosques? Why an ordinary compass for the general use by the general mass does not serve the purpose? Does it not make you suspicious of something fishy or shady in it? Doubtlessly. Dan Gibson could not show his Petra-mosques or between mosques without the help of this specially devised Qibla tool. It is not improbable that the Petra theory is the odd child of this odd Qibla tool. The real Petra-mosques and real between mosques did not really exist. Dear brothers and sisters, Petra is the first witness against Petra theory. Nobody found any trace of any kind of Islamic structure in Petra. You cannot show a single structure in Petra that might be ascribed or assigned to Islam or to the Muslims. It proves that the Muslims never lived there. It's a dictum of archaeology that the inhabitants of a city always leave some traces behind by which the archaeologists can read and determine their one-time presence in that city as well as their characteristic features, but no such traces are there in Petra that could be considered as the things left behind by the Muslims. It clearly proves and confirms the Muslim belief as true that Petra was never their dwelling place. No archaeologist ever claimed otherwise. Dan Gibson's incongruous and inept claim for Petra as the Qibla city or the original Mecca city or the city of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is therefore unfounded. Archaeological records of Petra or archaeological evidences in Petra do not support his claim. No map of the world ever showed Petra as Mecca. No history book ever described Petra as Mecca. History says that the city was under Nabatean rules, Egyptian rules, Greek rules and Roman rules by turns, happening one after another. Each of these nations left the marks of their living in Petra. But none of those marks bears any Muslim trait. Neither any structure nor any trait of sculpture visible in Petra can be called as Muslim. The Muslims invaded Jordan in the first half of the 7th century, during the Caliphate, probably in 636, but Petra was not then livable. These are historical facts and historical truth. No new proofs are needed. Dan Gibson and his fans continuously claim that the early mosques of the first 100 years faced towards Petra, and to materialize this claim they have especially designed and innovated a special kind of tool for drawing red lines on the maps showing mosques to face towards Petra, but this claim also proved wrong when an early mosque facing towards Mecca was discovered in Israel. Many other such mosques were also discovered in Saudi Arabia. The most logical controversy of the Petra theory arises out of the fact that Petra did not have any mosque. The absence of any mosque from Petra itself logically disproves the Petra theory. No, not a single mosque or its remnant was ever found in or around Petra. It leaves no doubt about Petra's non-Muslim character and non-Qibla stance. Unscientific research methodology of Dan Gibson, top 10 points. Dear viewers, I have kept this page white because I need your full attention, and no distraction from the subject. I know that his blindfolded fans will lose heart and start crying at the sight of their hope and dream shattered. But I am helpless. His objective and methodology are unscientific to the core. I would request my respectable viewers to ponder over the following 10 points. Number 1. He started by denying the facts of existing geography and history without showing any palpable cause for such denial. He only claimed that research nowadays has become easier because of the innovation of computer and internet, but it does not allow him to deny the existing facts of geography and history, because computer and internet cannot say anything about the past and present without standing on the current facts of geography and history. These two inventions, computer and internet, cannot ignore the current data and create any new data for any subject or anything of the human world. That would be false if they do so. So, Dan Gibson's rejection of the current data of geography and history is quite unscientific. His rejection of Microbe as the former Greek name for Maker, which in English is erroneously pronounced as Mecca, is unscientific. Microbe is there in the Ptolemy's map, and it is described by the current history and geography as the city of Mecca. Nobody can deny it without being scientifically wrong. He must rely on the universally accepted facts and figures of history and geography. Internet cannot generate anything new in their place, without being a generator of falsehood, to help him on this point. His stance on this point is totally wrong and unscientific. Only saying that those are traditional stories does not bear any sense, and it is not a scientific methodology of research. Number 2. Dan Gibson's roaming about in the Arab world for 20 years for doing research in Islam is based on his dogmatic faith that Islam is the religion of the Arabs and the Arab lands, and his friendship and living with the nomads for knowing Islam is based on the idea that Islam is a religion of the nomads. Both the ideas are wrong, and what he did or say standing on these wrong bases is also wrong and unscientific. Scientific methodology for research prescribes for the basic knowledge of the researcher concerned on the subject he engages himself to research in, which he basically lacks. Islam is a religion for mankind. Its basic sources are the Quran and the Hadith. So, one need not roam about in the desert of Saudi Arabia or Jordan or Lebanon or Syria, and it is not a must for him to have friendship with Arab nomads who have very little knowledge and practice of Islam. Islam is not a matter of tours and travels or seeking for opinions. It is very unreasonable and unwise, therefore unscientific. No doubt that his fans will retort by saying that Islam's prophet was from Arabia and that Islam's language is Arabic, so his roaming in the desert of Arabia is scientific. Well, but will these fans prescribe for me to roam about in the Egyptian deserts and to live among the Egyptian nomads for 20 years if I want to research on Judaism? The reply to this question is a simple no, because everybody will understand that Judaism is not a matter of Egypt, although Moses' life and his early followers were mainly related with Egypt. Yes, it will certainly be unscientific if anybody indulges in traveling throughout Egypt for 20 years in the name of research on Judaism. The same case will apply for a researcher who wants to roam about in the Bethlehem for 20 years in the name of research in Christianity, and the same lot will fall upon a person who will roam in Persia for doing research on Hinduism. Geographical facts are related, no doubt, but its implication in a religion is very little. Geographical features are always changing in the course of time while the religion itself is unchangeable, and a researcher who forgets the time factor in the changing process of everything should not engage himself in research. It is unscientific. Number 3. His negative attitude and comments on the current history of Islam is also unscientific. He declares the historical documents on the Prophet's life, on the Quran and on the happenings of the 6th and the 7th centuries as either false or problematic, showing cause that those were written mainly in the 8th century. He is unwilling to accept the history written after 200 years of the real happenings. He then starts writing the real Islamic history of Islam himself, evidently after 1,400 years. We can hardly hold our laughter. If the history written after 200 years be unreliable and unscientific, what should be the fate of his own history written after 1,400 years? Is it not unreliable and unscientific by 7 times? His argument that he has access to the internet and can do and undo many things by a single click of the mouse also rouses our laughter. Does his mouse allow him to create anything new or anew? No. He must find out the existing data by the click of his mouse, and that is the scientific boundary. History is not a fairy tale which can be generated through mouse click. History is always the existing facts and documents, and all types of history of mankind were written after the lapse of some time. Challenging the existing history without showing any real cause is unscientific. Number 4. He never researched on Mecca or Mecca. He commented on this city on hearsay. For example, he heard that no archaeological evidences were found under the soil of Mecca during the construction works of the city, and he refrained from excavating any spot of it relying on that hearsay, but he did not hold himself back to comment on the archaeological non-evidence of the city. Is it anyway scientific of a researcher? No. It was his duty to measure up the oldness of the important sites as well as the venerated things around the Kaaba, such as the graveyard, Maqam Ibrahim, the Zamzam, cave of the Mount Hira, houses of the people of the Prophet's time, the house of Khadija, Radiallahu anha, where the Prophet lived, the Mecca Museum and many other things like those. He did nothing on these sites and things but commented on Mecca's non-existence in the 6th and 7th centuries. Such comments are not worthy of a researcher, and the claim of such research is false. Making hearsay the base of research is unscientific. Number 5. Inclusion of unrelated things in a research project is unscientific. Dan Gibson has included such unscientific elements in his project. He attempted to fix the place of the origin of the Quran by pointing to the verses that mention the names of some fruits and animals, which is totally an unscientific process. Even if one forgets the holiness of the Quran and take it as a book of poems like those of Shakespeare or Rabindranath Tagore, it would certainly be unscientific to fix location of its being written on basis of the types of fruits and animals mentioned in any poem. Dan Gibson has done it unscientifically, for anybody can mention any name of anything in his poem without being near to that thing. Furthermore, none of the fruits and animals mentioned in the Quran were unavailable in Mecca, a great province of Saudi Arabia that include both Jeddah and Taif in both present and past. Mecca is not only a city. Its boundary is larger than what Dan Gibson and his fans could imagine. Any research based on such ignorance is unscientific. Number 6. Taif is a district of Mecca. From time immemorial it comprises both the town and villages. Taif city is still standing before our eyes, but Dan Gibson denies the existence of Taif city in his video Where is Taif? To substantiate his whim he questioned where the wall of Taif and where the temple of Taif. He pretended not to know that both the wall and the temple were destroyed by the Saqif clan, the inhabitants of Taif at that time, after embracing Islam in a body. They considered the wall engraved with gods and goddesses as well as the temple ignominious for a Muslim city. Anybody can go through any good article on the history of Tef from the Muslim or non-Muslim sources for verification of this account. The map of Arabia also shows the existence of Tef city. Dan Gibson never testified its age, but simply denied its existence and showed some ruins of Petra for Tef. This process of ignoring the reality is clear violation of scientific methodology for research. Nobody can deny the reality for the sake of unrecognized archaeological sites, while Tef itself is not bereft of archaeological evidences. How could Dan Gibson ignore these truths? Unscientifically. Number 7. He practices double standard of behavior in using the Muslim sources of references. He rejected the Bukhari and Tabari as reference books insofar as those books speak for Islam's authenticity, but he accepted the portions of those books as true which he could distort and misinterpret for denying the authenticity of Islam. He did this on his own scale of 200 years time lapse, and forgot the fact that the portions he accepted as true also fall under the same bar of the time lapse of 200 years. This double standard clearly shows his bias, which is quite unscientific as a research methodology. Both Bukhari and Tabari mention many miracles and miraculous incidents of the Prophet's life, including those of different battles, like Badr, Uhud, Trench, and all were either ignored or rejected as falsehood, but he accepted their citation of fruits and animals, water and vegetation, flowers and beauties of Mecca with a purpose to change the location of Mecca from Hijaz of Arabia to Petra in Jordan. He includes the meadows and villages with the city area while talking on Petra, but excludes meadows and villages and considers only the city area while talking on Mecca. This double standard of behavior has made him a propagandist for Petra against Mecca, and ultimately against Islam. Such propaganda in the name of research is 100% unscientific. His fans may call it a scientific research, but we know them as the mesmerized dolls of the most unscientific genre. Number 8. Allat is a pagan goddess, a dwarf, black, naked woman as like as the Kali of the Hindus. Dan Gibson gave her the form of a god and associated her with the moon, making the moon god of it. He did it with a palpable purpose to make an analogy with the name Allah. He concluded that the word Allah is a derivative of Allat, the moon god of the Middle East. This conclusion goes against all kinds of morality, education and reality, because Allat was never a moon god, that it's an insulting attack on Islam, and that the name Allah predated the names of all Mideastern gods and goddesses. Allat was never associated with the moon. She was a female genie and was worshipped by a small group of Arab people as a goddess. Her idol in the Kaaba premises was one of the 360 idols of other gods and goddesses who were deemed as inferior to God, Allah, by the Arab worshippers. They worshipped Allah, taking these idols as the via media between themselves and Allah. Another idol of Allat was at a nearby village of Mecca, which was destroyed by Khalid bin Walid under the instruction of the Prophet. Evidently, the name Allah was used by the Quraysh as well as by the Arab Jews and Christians before the Arab pagans innovated the goddess Allat. Allah, Arabic name of the Supreme Being. The term is a contraction of the Arabic Allah, the God. Both the idea and the word existed in pre-Islamic Arabian tradition, in which some evidence of a primitive monotheism can also be found. Although they recognized other, lesser gods, the pre-Islamic Arabs recognized Allah as the supreme God. Microsoft, Encarta, 2009. It is needless to say, Allat belonged to the lesser gods and goddesses. She was not considered by the Arab pagans as the supreme being or god. On the other hand, Allah was their supreme being or god. So, the name of Allat could not be the prime source of the name Allah. Dan Gibson was mistaken, and he lacked the proper knowledge of the matter. He acted on this subject like an undergraduate, and an undergraduate is universally considered as unqualified to do any kind of research on any subject. Number 9. 3 natural truths have been ignored by Dan Gibson while generating the Petra-mosque fairy tales. Truth number 1. Dan Gibson amused us with much fun by telling that the early mosques faced towards Petra instead of Mecca. But at the same time he told that the early mosques are not in their original shape with original faces at present. Some of those are lost, some are renovated, and some are later adjusted with mihrabs towards Mecca. Naturally, it is not possible for anybody to determine now, after 1,400 years, where those mosques faced to in the early years if not to Mecca. So, what Dan Gibson and his crazy fans say about Petra-mosques is based only on their surmise, neither on logic nor on the visible surroundings. So, his Petra-mosque tale is the result of his unscientific research methodology. Truth number 2. Early mosques did not have any mihrabs. So, it is not possible for anybody to determine their faces by the scale of degrees even if they would remain in their unrenovated, original shape. How could Dan Gibson determine it is still an unanswered question. We asked this question time and again, but neither Dan Gibson nor his blind supporters ever gave any reply. So, it can easily be concluded that the Petra-mosque theory is but a fairy tale which cannot survive a scientific test. Truth number 3, Google can show and do many things except showing the traceless ones. The mosques which have lost their traces, on which have totally been renovated, or the walls of which do not show any accurate directions cannot be accepted for a direction test by saying that it is done with the help of Google. Google can show you something accurately when you fix and supply the data accurately. When data are inaccurate, Google must show the inaccurate things. And those inaccurate things cannot be sold among the public as scientific truths. Dan Gibson has been doing this for many years. His input to the Google tool is not correct. How can he expect the correct output? In no way. Only drawing some red lines on the screen is not enough to be accurate. The starting point of every line must stand on accuracy, which Dan Gibson could never fix for any early mosque. No, nobody can fix it now, after lapse of 1,400 years' time and after so many occasions of changes. Nobody can fix the faces of early mosques accurately. So, the Petra-mosque tale of Dan Gibson must be rejected as inaccurate. To tell the truth, it is now too hard to determine whether those Dan mosques were originally mosques or non-mosque buildings. Our careful examination shows that even some palaces, too, have been enlisted as mosques by Dan Gibson. Such biased samples and baseless surmise are not acceptable in the field of research. How did Dan Gibson determine their faces, and how could he be sure that those faced towards Petra is still a mystery like that of fairy tales? Number 10. Dan Gibson's research project necessarily has two fields, namely Mecca and Petra. Ignoring Mecca and overdoing on Petra is an unscientific methodology. He did it, knowingly or unknowingly. So far as we know, he never entered Mecca, as it is forbidden to him, and as we find no trace of his research on Mecca. So, his research on Mecca remained undone. How could he reach to the conclusion that Petra was the Muslim holy city, instead of Mecca? Unscientifically. He did not find any traces of Muslim sculpture, Muslim culture and Muslim foundation in Petra. Scientific methodology would certainly suggest that the Muslims never lived in Petra. But Dan Gibson took an I don't care stance against this scientific truth, although his die-hard fans claim his research as scientific. He invented many analogies like the Zamzamin, stone reading, Petra-mosque, between mosque, Petra scrolls, pagan Islam and many other bizarre things, but all are bogus and misfits. None of these could be scientifically fitted with Islam. Biblical Zamzamin was not a well, so it was not the well of Zamzam. His stone reading was faulty and fabricated, not scientifically proved. Petra-mosque and between mosque are non-existent. Petra scrolls are widely known as Petra papyri, written in Greek that dealt with the economic affairs of a Christian family, that is the family of Theodore, and Islam was never pagan. So, all he says are meaningless, unscientific and rather prejudicial. His research project on Islam is a total failure because of his unscientific methodology.
Earthquake makes the difference between Mecca and Petra. Dan Gibson's false Qibla is lost. My dear viewers, you know that Petra was devastated by earthquakes many times. Islam, archaeology, and Dan Gibson confirm it. So the truth stands right. Dan Gibson's so-called Qibla and the so-called Zamzamin were battered and shattered by earthquakes. Islam calls it a curse on Petra. Scientists call it natural calamities. But we don't know what Dan Gibson calls it. We only know that he had a reverie of Qibla and Zamzam in Petra, lost forever under the shadow of earthquakes. On the other hand, Mecca has been standing there from time of the origin of the real Zamzam and the building of the actual Kaaba. With all their splendors, those have been experiencing the gathering of lakhs of people every day, along with the lakhs of inhabitants of Mecca. They were never shaken by any earthquakes. Here is the difference between Dan Gibson's Petra Mecca and the real Mecca. Let us have a comparison between Mecca and Dan Gibson's Petra. Number 1. Allah, Zamzam and Kaaba are never shaken by any earthquake, while Dan Gibson's dreamland Mecca is under the debris of Petra due to earthquakes and false battles. Number 2. Allah, Zamzam and Kaaba are not subject to earthquake. On the other hand, Dan Gibson, Zamzam and Kaaba cannot raise their heads because of earthquakes. Number 3. Allah's mercy is for the real Kaaba and the real Zamzam in Mecca. On the other hand, Allah's wrath and curse for the rebels of Petra and their lovers who desire to establish a false story of sham Kaaba and the airy Zamzam. So, all the differences between Mecca and Petra are manifest in the harsh reality of earthquakes, which Dan Gibson and his friends cannot see. Where are the archaeological and historical proofs for Dan Gibson's Petra thesis? Let us examine the whole things. I find no proofs from nowhere. You please see it for yourself. Let us examine. Archaeology disproves Petra thesis. Islam is not subject to archaeology, as its principal elements like Quran and Hadith are alive. For all that, we talk on archaeology because Dan Gibson has taken shelter in it to falsify Islam. But he fails because no traces of any Muslim sculpture is found in Petra. All are Greco-Roman. What does the ruins of Petra then prove? The Muslims never lived in Petra. What does the ruins of Petra then prove? The Muslims never lived in Petra. The Muslims never lived in Petra. Petra itself then rejects Dan Gibson's Petra thesis. He has been talking on and boasting of archaeology that disproves his own claims. Both archaeology and history of Petra stand firm against his Petra thesis. History of Petra disproves Petra thesis. The current history says that Petra was under the Roman Empire in the 6th and 7th centuries, and the area that comprises modern Saudi Arabia was never under the Roman rule. So, Petra was then related with the history of the Romans, not of the Muslims. The Quraysh lived beyond the rule of the Romans. They were in Mecca, independent and self-ruled. It proves that Petra had no relation with Islam in the 6th or 7th century. Dan Gibson's claim is wrong. Dan Gibson shows a site of Petra as the place of his imaginary Kaaba. And because of surrounding structures, that site has no required space for circumambulation by the huge crowd during the Hajj and Umrah. No place for the integral parts of the Kaaba like Zamzam, Hatim and Maqam Ibrahim is there. And the place is not situated between two hills as the Kaaba in Mecca stands between Safa and Marwa of Mecca. Evidently, his imaginary Kaaba is in wrong place, wrong shape, and in wrong surrounding. So it exposes itself as false. Here the archaeological evidences disprove the Petra thesis. History of Mina and Arafat kicks out Petra. Mina and Arafat are historically intertwined with the Hajj at Mecca. No such places, not even in name, are there near Petra. How can any sane man claim that people did Hajj at Petra? Even historical Muzdalifah, where the Muslims necessarily spend a night to observe Sunnah of the prophets during the Hajj, is not there near Petra. Thus, history kicks out Petra from the territory of Islam. No Safa and Marwa in Petra. Both history and archaeology are there with Safa and Marwa in Mecca. It is related with Hajj and with the history of Hazrat Hajira radiallahu ta'ala anha. The space between them is the Bakka valley, where the Kaaba stands. No such small hills side by side having proper space for the Kaaba to stand and for the Hajis to run between them are there in Petra. The small size of Safa and Marwa makes Dan Gibson grimace, but we know that their size was exact for hungry and thirsty Hajira to climb up them for 7 times in search of water around. Their slopes are also agreeable and desirable. Their heights are enough for a woman to stand on the top to search for water. The space between them was also optimum for her to run between. No such hills were ever there in Petra. Only Safa and Marwa are enough to destroy the Petra thesis. History of Islam is founded on Mecca and Medina. Petra has no place in the history of Islam. History of Islam is inseparable from Mecca and Medina. Why Dan Gibson is denying the current history? Under what authority does he deny? On which proof does he stand? Nothing. Who is he to deny? Nobody. He has been talking of archaeology, but archaeology itself proves him wrong. People should understand. People should understand the fact that Dan Gibson is not an archaeologist. So he does not have any right or stance to declare any historical truth as false or problematic by posing as an archaeologist or a historian. Both history and archaeology manifest Dan Gibson as wrong. He has been talking of archaeology, but archaeology itself proves him wrong. He has been talking on history, but history banishes his thesis from its territory. Both history and archaeology are active like antithesis against his thesis. People should understand the fact that Dan Gibson is neither an archaeologist nor a historian. So he does not have any right or stance to declare any historical truth as false or problematic by posing as an archaeologist or a historian. Islam flourished in Mecca, not in Petra as Westerners insist. The language of Islam, especially of the Quran, is Arabic. On the other hand, the language of the Nabateans of Petra was Aramaic. So it was impossible for Islam to flourish in Petra. It flourished in Mecca, the birthplace of the last prophet of Islam, Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Islam has nothing to do with Petra, and Petra had nothing to do with Islam. Dan Gibson's gas policy against Mecca is wrong. He never excavated any spot at Mecca to find any sign of grass and vegetation in the soil of ancient Mecca. No trace of his excavated point in Mecca is shown or exposed. So his claim of archaeological proof against Mecca is also unfounded. Even today grass and vegetation are seen in the vicinity of the mega city of Mecca. Please have a close look of the picture. We see grass and other vegetations in this picture. Why and how any man can claim those were not in Mecca in the days of the Quran's revelation? I don't know. Falsehood in the name of research. The Holy Quran mentions the camel, the cow, the sheep and the like. The non-Muslim researchers, especially Dan Gibson, took it as a cause for Petra against Mecca. Fallacy took him away because Mecca is a barren land. He saw no trace of grass at Mecca to feed the cattle. He therefore took Islam away from Mecca to Petra as it was necessary for him to feed the cattle mentioned in the Quran. Though it is true that Petra was also a barren city. Our children may giggle. We remember the verse number 13 of Surah Baqarah where it is said, "They take the Muslims as fools, beware of them. It is they who are the real fools, although they do not know that." For everybody's kind information, even today we find no trace of vegetation in the ruins of Petra. On the other hand, we find trees and grass near Mecca. Another important thing is that Allah cited the names of those animals as only reference, and no animal is related to any particular city or area of the earth. The references are simply for the whole of the earth. These have nothing to do with either Mecca or Petra alone. The Quran never said that those were the Meccan animals. So, Westerners conjecture that those animals were related with the birthplace of the Prophet is only overdoing. It does not bear any sense. It is totally falsehood. Their idea that birthplace of the Prophet must have vegetation, that is grass, grapes or olive, is also wrong. They think that the Quran was written by his Prophet, and therefore he must have seen those animals grazing before his eyes in his own birthplace, and he must have tasted every fruit mentioned in the Quran from his own orchard. These rotten, lunatic ideas about the Quran bear proof of their ignorance of two things. Number one, they do not know that the Quran's prophet was unlettered. He could neither read nor write, so the Quran is not his composition. And number two, Quran bears thousands of evidences that it is not a man-written book. I know that the short-sighted people will never agree, and they will insist on their own ideas. But even in that insistence, they are proved wrong. Grass and trees are there in Mecca. Date trees and plum trees are not very rare in Mecca. It was not impossible to have grapes and olive trees in the 6th or 7th centuries. Please have a look on the trees at Mecca in this picture near the horse camps as well as in the vicinity of Mecca. Dan Gibson's idea that Mecca was a 100% barren land is totally wrong. It is not fertile like Canada or India. But that does not mean no vegetation is there. Desert plants and animals grow naturally in the deserts. They should know it. Trees of Mecca were standing before Dan Gibson from the beginning. But he collected some sand in a teaspoon and now denies the existence of any vegetation in Mecca in the name of soil test and archaeological evidences. He says that Mecca does not have any archaeological signs and symbols of the days before the 8th century. It is totally wrong. My questions to his findings are: number one, was not Mecca on the planet before the 8th century? If yes, then his findings are not true. Archaeological evidences are available in every spot of the whole earth. Number two, what do the archaeological signs and symbols or trails mean? Are they only the remnants of lost buildings? If so, he is right in the sense that nothing of Mecca was ever destroyed. If not, he is on the wrong point because not a single point on the earth is there which does not have any signs and symbols of archaeology of the days before the 8th century. Number three, which spot of Mecca was excavated by Dan Gibson for archaeological portents? We do not find any such spot. He also did not show any such thing in his videos. Therefore, the whole of his claim is bogus, only conjectures. Some natural questions arise out of his conjectures. Number one, how is it that the Prophet's birthplace must have grass? No need. And who told him that there was no grassland near Mecca? Nobody. He tells of his research, which he never did. Only collection of a spoonful of sand is not research. Number two, who told him that the cattle head mentioned in the Quran must necessarily be of the birthplace of the Prophet? None. Number three, who told him that the vicinity of Mecca did not have any grass? As far as we know, Meccan cattle head grazed in the fields and valleys within 3 to 10 miles of Mecca. Even today they roam around the mega city of Mecca. So all his conjectures about the birthplace of Islam on the basis of grass is void. It does not hold much logic to believe in. The camel, the goat, the sheep, etc. are accustomed to live in the desert, and they are mainly desert animals. The camel roam about even in the desert of Sahara, the toughest and the most barren desert in the whole planet. Where lies the problem for those animals to live in Mecca? No problem, no problem, no problem at all. The goat and the sheep freely roam about in the desert of Sahara. What hinders them to roam about in the desert of Mecca? Nothing. The goat and the sheep grazing and frolicking in the desert. you see the picture. Grass is very little, but that does not necessarily prevent them from living there. It is said that the Arab goats and sheep at times devour the pieces of stone, and later those are found in their excrements. We are nobody to believe or disbelieve. It is reality. What was the harm? If they were in Mecca, we find no harm. These animals were actually in Mecca, even in the days of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even today, those are found around the Mecca city. They do not have any approval from Dan Gibson and his fans, but that does not matter. Their existence in Mecca is approved by Allah. Both plants and animals are there in Mecca, although not in plenty. So let us conclude that the alien researcher is alien to both Mecca and Islam. He has got nothing to do with the Muslims. The cattle and the cattle feed are not any deciding factors as to where did Islam flourish. Allah chose Mecca and it was Mecca. That is all. It is not a matter of argument. It is reality, natural reality. Reality does not care for any logical debate, and people who engage themselves in such futile debates are on the wrong side. The Quran has rightly pointed out for the Muslims about them. They should keep aloof from them.